How's it going, everyone? A Shrewsbury here, and today we continue our mini-series on how to make your very own hero in the new Overwatch Workshop editor available on the PTR currently. In this specific tutorial, we're going through how to make your own dive tank hero in Overwatch. So a few things that you need with a dive tank hero is you need speed and mobility, as well as a little bit of CC, but just some way to kind of protect your allies and create space. In our last episode, we made two abilities for that purpose. One is a speed boost that gives you a short amount of speed for a very short amount of time, and the other one is a stun. So if I go out here and find my Zenyatta, I'll show you this stun. It grapples the enemy hero in front of us and stuns both of our characters so that I can't be dealing damage or capitalize it on myself, but my teammates can help me out with that. And you can see Zenyatta's icon pops up right next to that stun logo. So if you want to figure out how to do that, hit my last video, I'll put a link in the description. But for this video, we're going through making passive abilities for your Overwatch hero. This passive ability that I just made is a Berserker type ability where when you're low health, you have multipliers to your normal abilities. So this includes attack modifiers, CC modifiers, and damage reduction, basically. So I have a key bound that starts dealing damage to me, if you can see down there. And it'll deal damage at a consistent rate until we get to half health. And then once we get to half health, our attack modifier will start going up, and that will give us more and more damage resistance. So we get to half health, our modifier is going up in the top middle, and our health is going down slower and slower, even though I'm dealing it at a consistent rate. In addition, we will also be able to hit harder when we have our attack modifier up and hit people back further. And also have this nice little effect that tells us and everyone else that we are mad and ready to rumble. So if you're interested in learning how to make your very own passive ability in the Overwatch Workshop's editor, stick around. I'll be going through the code. Alright, here we are in the rule set editor for the Overwatch Workshop system. And you can see there's a lot of rules here, but keep in mind the first few are from my last tutorial. The second few are what we're going to look at. So what we need to have our Berserker ability is we need one variable that's constantly updating to see our current state of health and how that should relate to our modifier. We'll call it M. So this is going to be our player variable M that will keep track of what you saw in the top middle of my screen for that attack modifier. And then we can go through and multiply different effects by that number. So if that number is closer to 2, we'll be doubling our effects. But if it's still at 1, nothing will happen because multiplying by 1 just keeps that at normal values. So let's take a look at our refresh rage modifier. This is the modifier that we will be using for everything. So the first thing we want to do is check to see if we're above or below 50% health. Because if we're above, we don't need to do anything. If we're below, then we need to start changing the modifier. So if our health percent is greater than 0.5, and that means 50%, so it's 0.5, not 50 in this context, then we will skip the following ability, meaning we won't do anything basically. And then the same thing is on the other end, we'll skip this ability if our health is below. So this is basically saying, when you get to the script, do this if the health is below 50%, and do this if it's above 50%, because it's skipping it if it's not. So it's kind of this double negative thing. So I'll share my code at the end of the video if you want to take a closer look. But let's keep going for now. So this triggers when we're below 50%, and it's this big old math equation. And first you need to understand how the math works in this editor. So we have, think about it as when you start, you can either have a basic value like 2, or you can split that into an equation. So instead of putting value number 2, you could say multiply, and that will give you 2 more values that you multiply together, and it'll get your final value. You can further split that into more and more equations. So think about your equation starting from the middle and splitting into the left side of the equation and the right side of the equation. And you can build up till you finally have something. It might be helpful if I were to write this out. I might splash on the screen what this looks like in normal algebraic form, because that might be something that's more helpful to you. So here's an updated equation. I made a few changes to make it a bit simpler, but here is it written in algebraic form. Basically what we need is a number between 0 and 1 telling us what percent of damage we've taken out of our max health. In order to do that, we take the amount of damage we've taken, which would be our max health minus our current HP, which would say if we're at 180 health out of 200, this would be 20. And if we divide that by our max HP again, we get that in a percentage. So then it would say like 80% or something in the form of 0.8. Now we need to multiply this by 2 because we want it to cap at 2 and at half health be 1. So we just need to multiply everything by 2. So this makes it so that our value when we're at half health will be 1, and our abilities will only trigger at half health. And when we get closer and closer to death, we'll get closer and closer to the value 2. Anyway, we're going to move on. So we have this is ongoing max health and damage. So this is a script that will just continue to run and continue to check. One thing I do is I set the health to 60%, meaning when Winston's in rage form, he usually has 1,000 health. I just wanted to have him have 600, but we can also set the damage dealt to 100 times this M value that we just set. So if we had 1.5 as our M value, he would be dealing not 150 damage, but 150% of his normal damage. Here is where we actually start to apply our damage resistance. So if we are less than half health, we can activate this ability, and this will give us damage reduction relative to our M modifier. So the way I actually have this set up is when you make a damage resistance, you set a new number that you want to take instead of your normal number. So if this is 100, you'll be taking damage as normal. But say if you set this to 80, or you would do it here. If you set it to 80, you would have 20% damage reduction because you only take 80% of the damage. That's how that works. What we need to do is take less and less damage the higher M is. So if we start at 100 and subtract, remember we have this branching thing, we start with 100 and we subtract M times 25. So once we're half health, we have 25% damage reduction, with a max of 50% damage reduction when we get closer and closer to 2. So the closer we get to death, the more damage resistance we get, but it's not crazy. It's maxing at 50, and usually it's around 30. This is to end rage, so if we get above 50 health, again, we set another value. As you can see, I have this other R value, which helps with the effects, because sometimes you only want to create an effect the first time you go into our rage mode. So I have an R value that it'll only trigger this if it's false, and then it'll immediately set it to true. And then once we go out of it again, it'll check to see if it was true. Basically saying only trigger these effects if we're going from not being enraged to being enraged, or vice versa. The last thing we have is on hit. So this is a way to have us knock back the character further based on how much our M modifier is. Now Winston already has knockback, but what I did in the custom game settings is I dropped his knockback down quite a bit. Now I have a new event when I deal damage, meaning when he slaps somebody, I apply my own impulse in the direction that is relative between us. So the direction is starting position ourselves and the ending position victim, meaning the person we dealt damage to. So that's just a line directly away from us. And it will knock them back 20 times our modifier. So normally it'll just be a normal amount, but if we're low health, it'll get closer to doubling that distance. And this is just my script for dealing damage to myself. So I hope that was helpful. Let me quickly share the code for you guys. I hope this was helpful. If you found it helpful, please leave a subscribe. I'll be making more videos about this character and characters to come and just everything to do with Workshop in general. So until next time, thanks and have a good day.